Okay, we'll go ahead and get started while folks are joining. Welcome to our first Ask Me Anything webinar. We are delighted that everyone could join us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carolyn Kuski. I'm the founder and executive director of Insurance for Good. And for those of you new to our organization, we're a nonprofit helping communities and the public sector with insurance education, capacity building, and solutions development to support their broader recovery and resilience goals. And we're so glad that you're here with us. So our Ask Me Anything sessions are your chance to get your questions answered from our leading experts. Our experts are not prepping talks or presentations. They are showing up to these sessions to answer your questions. And I am very pleased that we have Francis Bouchard with us today to launch this series with us.
Hey, Carolyn.
Yeah, hi, Francis. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for using a 20-year-old picture in the introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, excellent. I didn't even realize we'd done that. So for folks who haven't met Francis before, first and foremost, he's on Insurance for Good's Market Insights Advisory Group, which I'm very happy about. But he is the managing director of climate at Marsh McLennan, where he works across the firm's 4 different businesses to drive climate-focused commercial, social, and impact initiatives. He's served on a number of externally facing roles at Zurich before going to MMC, including most recently as the group head of public affairs and sustainability. He is also the insurance sector liaison for the Resiliency Company. He sits on the board of directors of SBP, both great organizations that we've been thrilled to partner with at various points in time. I will interject there. Holds a series of other appointments, including Insure, another amazing partner at Duke University. He has decades of experience working at this intersection of climate and insurance, which is our conversation today. So I'm just so pleased, Francis, that you were willing to test out this new model with us and see
Let's
how it
give it
goes.
a shot. Let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a shot.
Just to reiterate, though, and I think you've said this already, Carolyn, but I'm here as me. I'm not here representing anyone that I'm affiliated with. So if I say anything that offends you, bring it to me
Not
because
any of your organizational, yeah.
I am here on my own. Yep.
Thank you. I did not say that, and that's very important. So thank you for putting that out there. Let me add a few other words of context and maybe rules of the road. So first, when folks registered, lots of people submitted questions, which was fantastic. So we downloaded those, and we're going to start by running through all of those. So I'm just going to throw these questions at you, Francis, as we go here. About halfway through, I'll start looking to see if there's any live questions. So if you get questions that you wish you'd submitted or that come up when you're hearing some of the answers, please just use the Q&A box and go ahead and put those in there. And we'll try to get to some of those as well as the ones that were submitted ahead of time. And we'll just do our best to cover as many topics as we can.
Great.
So
Do
yeah,
I
as
get
I
do I
said,
get to call a friend or anything like that, Carolyn? Or
yeah, totally like a lifeline type thing. Yes. Yeah, we'll see. Or maybe you can just tee up the next Ask Me Anything for other
perfect. I'll do
questions.
that.
Um, So this is, yeah, a Q&A session, no presentation. It's also, not really a back and forth. We're going to let you answer, Francis, and then move on to the next one. I do want to stress this is an open forum, but in case there is any press on the line, this is off the record. But if you hear something intriguing and you want to follow up with Francis after the webinar to get an on the record remark, please just reach out at the conclusion of the session and we can connect you. So do you have any other ground rules, Francis, or we'll jump in?
Let's jump.
Let's jump. Okay. So to get us started, I'm going to take moderator prerogative and ask my only question here at the top because I think it'll also help us set the scene. So as we heard in that very brief bio I gave about you, you've been working in insurance for a long time. You've been thinking about climate change for a long time. So can you just start by telling us a little bit about your professional journey at the intersection of these topics? And maybe also, if you could weave in as you go, how you've also maybe been seeing some of the landscape evolve over the years. So let's start with that.
It's evolved a lot. Language has evolved. Public sentiment has evolved. Government involvement has evolved. I guess I have probably 3 different legs or segments of the journey, if we're going to stick with that analogy. For the first 15, 17 years of my career, I really grew up kind of in the Washington policy space. Never worked on Capitol Hill, but from my first job here was always in the insurance space. So, in the 90s, so I started in the late 80s and was here till '05. In the 90s, there were a lot of issues relevant to climate. We didn't call it climate change back then. If anyone called it anything, it was global warming. Um, but the topic was discussed, and I was lobbying for the Reinsurance Association of America, and there were a lot of intra-industry dialogue, if not actual conflict around um, capital, the availability of capital, the price, availability, affordability, particularly in Florida after Hurricane Andrew in 1992 is really what kicked it off. And for the next, let's say, through the 90s, for the rest of the decade, there was a lot of discussion on Capitol Hill about the exact same issues we're talking about today, Carolyn, right? So, I was working with, for, against. It really varied on so many different levels, different segments of the industry and different players who were coming in. I spent a lot of time, for example, with the capital market providers talking about the early stages of the cat bond market in the 90s as an illustration that capital is coming. And then I worked for Frank Nutter, who most people on the line probably know. And during the 1996 presidential campaign, Al Gore was actually going around the country quoting this reinsurance guy, Frank Nutter, who said, we need to get better at understanding the science and the implications of the science. So probably my first, and as his lobbyist, I had to go up on the Hill and kind of explain that to people. And some liked it, some didn't, which is no different than today, right? So I guess that first segment, that first era is really policy oriented, but it also exposed me to the very different, and I mean fundamentally different views that different segments of the sector have on these issues where we see capital shortages or expensive or and it plays out into the market. So that's probably that first era. The second era, I kind of went corporate in the sense that I moved to Switzerland and took on a series of global functional roles for Zurich Insurance Group, and that exposed me to a totally different perspective. It really deepened my understanding of the business of insurance. So again, I was with a trade association before that. The members keep you kind of at a arm's length if you're at the trade association. When you're in house, you really start to absorb, the strategy, the rate of return that you expect to have, the product suite, the geographic distribution and diversity and all these things, particularly as a communications head, where you got to explain every quarter how the company did from a financial perspective. It really gave me a deep kind of learning experience into exactly how insurance companies make money and how global companies operate in multiple jurisdictions. During that time, and that was really from 2005 to 2019, 20, it depends on how you count it. That's really where I got exposed to this issue, again, first of global warming and then climate change from the internal perspective. And it was very different because it was not driven by policy. It was really driven by our exposures and our client dialogues. And over time, it started to get affected by our employees who were asking our executives, what are we doing on climate change? What are we doing on climate change? So it was a very different motivator and a very different set of actors and answers and issues. So I started getting involved pretty early when I got a call from the CEO saying, what's our story on climate? And I said, well, I'm just a storyteller. Tell me what it is. And he said, well, go out and work with the businesses. So, we spent about a year and pulled together, I think, the industry's first climate office in 2007. And it was very product and client oriented. And that evolved into a really robust corporate responsibility strategy. And the flood program, the Zurich flood program came out of that eventually. And became, a wonderful program that many people on the call here, understand. And working for a Swiss company, it really allowed us to get really engaged, in the public discourse around climate as well. So during that period, my responsibilities shifted and changed, but the climate stuff always seemed to kind of stick with me, Carolyn, right? So that was from a functional perspective. And then when I came back and left Zurich eventually in 2021. I had to kind of figure out what do I want to do when I grow up. And at that point, I said, all right, there's this issue of climate is not getting the same attention in the US that it got in Europe, and I don't see the industry leading a dialogue. So why don't I just go out there and kind of see what what dust I can kick up, right? By maybe challenging the industry or suggesting partnerships or maybe reminding the industry that we've done this before. We have wonderful legacy programs and institutions out there that have helped society manage electricity risks or automobile risks or others, right? So it became a bit of I guess, a catalyst or a gadfly or the word I actually probably prefer is entrepreneur. So for those of us on this call or elsewhere who work for very large companies and you wonder how can you ever change somebody's mind, it's possible, but you got to find allies and you got to have a damn good reason and really make the case. So I guess those are the three eras, policy, then functional management, and then a bit of a entrepreneur and maybe more externally oriented. So, for me, it's a natural because the insurance sector has such a critical role to play in society of helping society manage these exposures that it's really comfortable space, Carolyn. I know it is for you as well, but it's something that I believe in deeply because I have a very deep, admiration isn't even the right word, almost obsession with the social value that the insurance sector creates with its products and its services and what we do for people and communities. Like many of people on the call, I'm sure I've been at large claim sites and I've seen the damage, but also the relief and the joy that the insurance industry can bring back to individuals and families and communities. So, I believe in that so deeply, and then I see that we're maybe not reaching that point yet on the climate issue. So it's really been a labor of love for me over the last several years.
Francis, I just love that, and it's inspiring to hear you. I also did not know that word entrepreneur. I think that's fabulous. I'm going to start using that myself. Um, okay, that was great, and I think a perfect start to kind of turning into some of these questions. So I took a quick look through them this morning before we got on, and I think what you just said is going to be a perfect segue because most of the questions that came in were really about moving to solutions. There was far fewer questions on kind of getting a sense of the problem. So I think at least the listeners we have on today want to kind of get right into like, what do we do and how do we kind of push that positive change?
Kudos.
So yeah, so let's jump right in. Okay, here's the first one. How are insurers thinking about property and community level risk mitigation efforts in their underwriting?
Well, at the asset level, it's what we've been doing for 350, 400 years, right? I mean, what do you think they were doing in the coffee house in London, right? They were looking at not just shipping routes, but where the pirates were hiding, and encouraging people to sail around the Straits of Malacca rather than through them if pirates had been seen. So, in terms of the asset level risk mitigation, I think we have a proud history of that. I think, in this space particular, IBHS is an incredibly effective, science-based organization that the industry has stood up, and we have a lot to be proud of there. Now, where I think it starts to become a challenge at the asset level, as we're starting to see in, high exposed markets, is, when a confluence of different factors, all of which result in higher costs, are happening at the same time, it really is a struggle. The insurance sector is, we're used to writing risks in kind of a consumer price index environment where prices may be going up 1.5, 2, 3, maybe percent type of thing. These days, you've got, construction material costs skyrocketing. You've got home costs skyrocketing. You've got tort costs skyrocketing. You've got underlying risk costs skyrocketing. So, I think our ability to manage these issues in the long term, simply at the asset level, is going to be challenged. Which is why, I think this new steps we're taking into the community level is absolutely critical. Now it's more difficult because there's an ecosystem, and I would argue we have not been perhaps the most active, proactive kind of partnership cultivation sector. We don't go out there and build these state-based coalitions to drive, market-based solutions. We kind of fight our battles as they come, and but I think the physical nature of the wildfire risk in particular is going to demand community level responses. And we're starting to see, whether it's regulatory or legislative concepts or even private sector proposals, of how to account for. I mean, the IBHS, remember, the IBHS was only asset level focused up until just a few years ago. So this community orientation of understanding the broader drivers of risk is kind of new for the IBHS and for the industry. So I think we're going to see a lot more of the community-based incorporation of risk or an identification of risk management at the community level. But our bread and butter remains at the asset level, and I think we'll continue to get better and better at understanding and promoting and incentivizing those solutions at both the asset level and at the community level. But I think personally, I'm more excited about the community level because I think it better reflects the societal accountability that's required here. The insurance industry is not alone and can't be alone in kind of solving these issues. It's much bigger than us. So, that community level approach is the one that I think we're going to start seeing more and more once we perfect it and once it gets accepted by kind of all those elements of the ecosystem.
I just love that sentiment and really also want to underscore what you said, that that's such a new approach for the insurance industry that's been really focused at an asset level. So um, early days, but excited.
Early days, but I mean, you've seen
Yeah,
what IBHS has already done with, I think they put out their second community prepared. I mean, that's a big deal. And, I hope the industry puts more effort into advancing those kind of projects than we perhaps have done with the fortified. I mean, there's some wonderful programs out there in fortified. Don't get me wrong, Alabama, Alabama, Alabama. We're always talking about Alabama.
right.
But the coastline is bigger than Alabama, and the industry. I just haven't seen the industry really organized to push for more fortified. I hope we see that. I hope we see that with the wildfire stuff as well.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe that actually transitions into the next question. Actually, I'm going to group the next two to and give them both to you together because they're very similar. So, how can we effectively use insurance to incentivize adaptation measures? So some of the stuff you're already just talking about. And relatedly, because this is one type of incentivization, the next question is, do companies give discounts if policyholders invest in adaptation? So maybe this is kind of moving into the pricing conversation.
Yeah, the pricing conversation, and I'm not an underwriter, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so I can't even pretend to be one. But I guess I'll reverse them, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Yes, the industry gives discounts as incentives. We have always done that. Again, going back to the Lloyd's Coffee House, seat belts, automobile, what kind of car you drive, how fast you drive, whether you get tickets. I mean, the automobile space is just full of incentives or disincentives, right? Where the insurance industry has massive loads of data to show that, if we offer this price for so much less, we'll actually see a corresponding risk benefit, right? So, and that's the key. And when an intervention, a risk reduction intervention like a seatbelt, is so directly visible in terms of how it saves money and lives and whatnot, that's an easy sell to make. Okay, you use your seat. Many of you may not even know this, but there used to be cars without seat belts or not automatic seat belts, right? So just keep that in mind. So we incentivize. We had a lot to do with incentivizing the safety of automobiles. And use the price mechanism to do that. So the answer is yes, we do that all the time. But there needs to be an elasticity element of it where people will actually make a choice and we can still write the insurance policy based on the risk base of that policy. This is the issue we're having now is there's so many different, again, factors raising the cost of insurance that, suggesting a 2% discount when the overall premium is going up 35% doesn't really work, right? It's not really sending that signal because there's so much noise in some of the pricing that's happening today. So I think the answer The first question was, what again? Are we going to do more of it, or how we do it?
Yeah, how can insurers
Yeah.
help incentivize
So,
more?
so,
Yeah.
so what's critical is that one, that we have the actuarial and modeling data to document that X, Y, and Z actually reduce the risk by X%. I mean, it's absolutely critical that we can connect those two so we can make conscious choices. When the numbers are set for us randomly, that's where it starts to become an issue. And I understand, the incentive government has to see us sending those risk signals or those incentives as well. 100% understand and tend to agree conceptually, but if it's not rooted in the modeling and in the numbers and in the risk, then it's not really an incentive to change behavior. It's simply a regulatory fiat, right? So I think that's the issue we're going to go into here. One of the challenges we've faced, and I think this was embedded in the way you asked the question originally. We do struggle in some cases to capture the actual economic value of an intervention or some type of risk reduction effort, right? Some adaptation intervention. And I think those are particularly the ones at the community level, Carolyn. And we just talked about asset versus community. Our modeling is traditionally at a regional level or perhaps even at a national level. It's very rare for us to be able to get access to modeling at a watershed level, for example, right? And to look at all of the different things that are being done across the watershed that affects the water coming out kind of at the bottom or at the end of that watershed, right? So those kind of interventions that are more local and are not being done by the U.S. Army Corps are a challenge for us to embed in. So something we need to do better. And I know Marsh is quite deeply involved in a few projects, and I'm sure many others in the industry are doing the same. We're trying to find how insurance can be a mechanism where we can begin to monetize the positive externalities of various efforts to reduce risk, right? So that sounds like I don't know, an economics professor thing, kind of mumbo jumbo, but what we're trying to do is, and I promised myself I wasn't going to cite these numbers, but this 1 to 7 thing, Carolyn, and you and I have been
Yeah.
talking about this stuff for 30 years. How much do you save with $1 invested, all that. Um, I find those numbers to be troubling these days because where is that $7? The reality is that $7 is just flowing down the river and going out into the ocean or out into a lake. I think the insurance industry can play a role to capture that corresponding ROI, that $7 for the dollar invested, and bring it back either into the community or plow it back into more resilience, right? So we need to be more creative, I think, as a sector about how we articulate the value, the resilience value of particular actions, particularly those community-wide ones. We're being asked by regulators left and right. We're getting pushed and pressured to tell our clients basically what they need to do. And in often cases where we can't tell them what to do because we don't know, Carolyn, right? And that's something that we need to solve for.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, as an industry that prices risk and manages risk, I think now insurance is being looked to by a lot of different stakeholders to help do exactly what you said about how we capture in a specific financial way the benefits of risk reduction. I'm going to I'm going to put one question on hold and I'll come right back to it, but I feel like you just started answering the one after it. So I just want to pull it up and
Sure.
see if there's anything else you want to say about it, which was how can climate practitioners and insurers work together to support communities? And I feel like you just started laying out an answer to that. So, but that was a specific question. So if you want to add anything on that specific front.
And I'm sorry, it was regulators and
Sorry.
carriers?
Climate practitioners and
Oh,
insurers, actually. I guess maybe that's slightly different. Maybe you were talking about some public sector partnerships, but I guess
no, the practitioners, I think are at the end of the day, they're going to be some of our best allies, right? Because, what I've seen over the last few years is that the practitioner class has absolutely figured out that insurance is part of the solution, not the problem, right? So, when I started kind of this last part of my journey here, went to a lot of conferences, and Carolyn, I suspect you do the same, where I was the only insurance representative there. And people would come to me and kind of lay it out, right? Or lay it on me, right? It's kind of that whipping, whatever it was, for the insurance sector. And that's changed. Now, there are so many insurance representatives rightfully at these meetings, and it's because so many people want to work with us, right? So the practitioners have understood the connection between affordable insurance and housing and that critical role in how we are signaling risk, not kind of creating it or imagining it. We are signaling risk, and that we can use our tools in many different ways to support them. So I think that that practitioner slash insurer coalition of sorts is an inch away. I think there are going to be some really powerful alignments of interest between those communities that want to ensure that the citizens have access to insurance and the industry that wants also to make sure citizens have access to insurance. We just need to make sure it's priced properly and that it reflects the risk. I mean, I shrug to suggest it's simple. It's not simple by any stretch, right? But I do think that coalition of those of interest, Carolyn, are going to be absolutely critical to driving the type of community-based solutions that we're going to need to have.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. Okay. I can see there's a bunch more questions. We have new questions coming in. There's a bunch more questions on kind of managing climate impacts and resilience. But first, let me go back to this other question, which was on the other side of climate. And it was, why do insurers continue to underwrite? This is specifically LNG, but I'm going to broaden it because I think the question, these stakeholders,
Yeah.
is often much broader, like underwrite fossil fuels when that's accelerating the kind of impacts we're facing. Do you want to weigh in on that topic?
Do I want to weigh in? No, I don't, but I'll answer it anyways.
Because it's Ask Me Anything. Thanks, Francis.
Exactly. And I have some personal experience here as well, but you know, I guess there are multiple ways to answer it. One, I think that the suggestion that the insurance sector should be the regulator of either a national or global energy scheme is suggesting we have a much different role than I think we should be playing. So, when we're challenged by, hey, why don't you put the either LNG or oil and gas sector or the coal, whatever, however, and I appreciate you broadening it because there are clearly nuances, if not stark differences between them. But when the suggestion is that the insurance industry should decide to shut down an energy source at a time when we do not yet have sufficient renewable energy to keep everyone's lights on and keep our computers on and everything else, our data centers, now that we all want to use AI, I I mean I don't know how or why we would take on that role where we shut down sector. We decide. And by the way, the moment we decide, quote unquote, to take down a sector is the day that the antitrust lawyers start lining up at our door and start suggesting, hey, have you guys colluded on this? So um, I think there's a lot of fundamental philosophical issues with whether we should be playing that role or not. Now, that said, we have a unique and powerful role to play to expose to the LNG or the coal operator, whoever, what risks they are creating, what risks they are facing, and what tools or approaches that others in we can benchmark them against others and show them that there are pathways to either net zero or to an acquisition or just to shut down the assets. And here's how you can do it in a responsible, risk-based fashion. So those, when I say I have experience here, those are the conversations that I think the insurance industry is uniquely positioned to have with these companies, and that is to take a risk lens, not a political lens. I mean, imagine, this topic is so politicized. There are not a lot of sectors going into owners and operators of these heavy emitter sectors that are going in there talking about it from not a political perspective, but from a purely risk perspective. And again, risk you're creating, but risk you are facing. And I have been fortunate enough to be part of some of those conversations, and it really does open people's eye. I've seen large industrial clients take on new approaches based on where we suggested their risks were and where their risks were going over the next few years. So I think we have a very significant role, Carolyn, to play. I think that role is really risk-based and not kind of policy-based, if that makes sense. And I think if we play that role, we'll be highly influential and it will accelerate the transition to net zero.
Great. Now I'm going to ask you to talk about a role in another sphere. And that's the next question was, how can insurance be used to provide funding for ecosystem restoration? But I'm going to couple it because I see that a question has come in the Q&A just now relatedly, which is, do you see nature-based solutions being taken seriously as community level risk mitigation? So maybe kind of putting both of these things together, what do you think about insurance and nature?
So Um, I spent my day yesterday not at Climate Week events in Washington. Today's what, Wednesday? No. So Mo Monday, I was not here. I was meeting with a Midwest water agency head and a large conservation group and several of us insurers and a few other folks in the room to talk about precisely this topic. Not to talk about it, to actually start to implement a pilot that would attempt at least to monetize the value coming out of 7,000 acres of new wetland restoration along the watershed on which this river or this community sits on. So, what do I think about it? I think it is an incredible opportunity for the insurance industry to um, unlock not just the physical value of these type of projects, but the economic value. And again, I'm going to go back to this 1 to 7 thing, which again, I promised I wouldn't. But right now, let's say you do these 7,000 acres, and everyone intuitively understands, wow, you just sucked up X number of gallons and you shoved them deep down into the ground. And well, next time there's a flood, there's going to be dramatically lower water at the community downstream. Intuitively, we know that. I mean, but does the insurance industry reflect that in the premiums it charges those people living downstream? Not yet, right? It is just a challenge for us to do that, which means the money by the way, the other entities that benefit the shippers who are going up and down, the railroad tracks that are right along the river's edge, industry that's on the utilizing water or on the river for whatever reasons. There's so many beneficiaries of these positive externalities that are free riding, including, well, I guess we're not free riding, but we're not reflecting the value, right, in our pricing. So we're trying to find a way to do just that, Carolyn. And I would encourage, all insurers to find their NBS project out there because, Mother Nature is a hell of a risk manager, and we're
I
the
like
ones who've
that.
kind of disrupted her approach to flooding and to other natural risks, right? I mean, that we used to be able to bounce back a lot easier and quicker before we put cement over everything, for example, right? So I think one, NBS it will be a major part of the answer. But two, I think that only happens if we find a way to capture the economic value of those. And I think the insurance industry has a big role to play in that.
Yeah, I think it's directly related to what you were talking about earlier with these new partnerships and ways of
Correct.
capturing value. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
That's
it's
great.
I would never have guessed that I'd be sitting for a full day and a half with a sewer agency head, right, to talk about these issues. But those are the people who are being asked by, city councils and mayors and governors, to solve these issues, and they're turning to us, Carolyn. And if we don't have anything to offer them, I don't know where else they go for these answers, right? So it's another reason why I'm urging our industry brethren here to, get out there and have these discussions. Even if we don't have the solutions, we got a lot to learn. And these are the kind of conversations where you do learn.
I like that, Francis. I know it's quite a call to arms, but a call to jump in. I like it. Okay, next question. Insurers can reprice or walk away every 12 months. asset owners can't. So the question is, how should long investors underwrite for insurance? But maybe you could also just let me again kind of help add, or I'm gonna add a little bit of broadening here too. If you could talk about some of these temporal dimensions between insurance as a one-year contract, not just long-lived assets, but loans and mortgages, there is often this temporal mismatch. So any thoughts you want to share on that or what that does to incentives and possible solutions?
Yeah, it just makes it harder, right? I mean, there is a temporal mismatch, not only between us and other financial instruments, but us and the risk, right? I mean, the risk is not all of a sudden going to manifest over the next 12 months. So even if there's a environment, a geography exposed to a risk that is increasing, whether it's sea level rise or wildfire or these others, um, we can't price that in because that's beyond the scope of our policy. So, the regulator wouldn't allow us and the customer wouldn't want us to, right? Because we're doing 12 months. Just charge me for the risk over 12 months. Don't charge me for the risk over beyond that.
Yeah,
So
nobody wants to pay their future risk now.
precisely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it's not the mechanism we have in place, right? So I think that the mismatch, the temporal mismatch that you reference, is a complicating factor. I was in a meeting this morning where precisely that issue came up again, right? That they can pull together financial instruments in different durations, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, 30, however the asset buyer or asset owner wants to do it. But the insurance markets, are pretty rigid in their one. In the commercial space, there's more flexibility, but primarily in the 12-month contract. So yeah, I, I don't think I know how to solve this one, Carolyn. I would like to see some more experimentation with multi-year policies at the retail level that perhaps reflect, an ability to reprice within a zone, or, maybe there are approaches where we can start to pool. Think about the fact that we sell property casualty insurance one policy at a time, but health insurance is rarely sold that way, at least in the United States, right? Where the vast majority of Americans who are insured through group policies, and there are efficiencies to be gained that way. And I'm not suggesting we start to sell property casualty insurance the way we do health insurance, but there are probably structures we could come up with that begin to create more flexibility around the risk because it's a larger scale insurance policy, right? I mean, that's the reason why, company A, B, and C, global company can dictate terms and get more flexible with a captive and with all these other, because of the size, right? And on the retail personal property casualty, we can't do that, right? So I think there's a mechanism somewhere out there where we can create more diverse pools, which gives us flexibility on terms and conditions that perhaps we couldn't do when it was an individual, Carolyn. So I think that's probably as far as I can think in terms of how we're going to solve that one. I do think it's out there. Somebody's going to solve it, and they're going to lock a customer in for a few years and create some serious value.
Yeah, and I like your point just that we need to find a way to do more sort of creative experimentation to like learn and adjust and test out some of these ideas. I think that's really
Yeah,
important.
and keep in mind too, though, that most companies have a retention rate of over 90%, right? So we
That's a
we
good point.
we
That
say
people
this
stick with
and
their insurer for a long time.
they do. So to me that suggests that there's some stickiness that we can maybe translate into creative solutions. But again, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Okay. Um, I'm now going to group again three questions together, one that came in and two that I see coming into the Q&A around where we're at with kind of federal policy. And I'll let you take this in any direction you want by giving you these three ones together. So the first one is, how is the insurance industry reacting to federal government uncertainty related to resilience and hazard identification funding? So I think this is probably referring to the pullback of federal dollars and programs that help with climate data, weather data, risk assessment data, maybe as well as pullback of FEMA risk reduction grant program dollars. And then we have another one that says Municipalities have been relying on FEMA to foot the bill and have had little motivation to build resilience for their industry and their assets. How do we come to a more holistic government partnership? I'm throwing that in because they can no longer rely on FEMA. So maybe that's changing that dynamic a little bit lately. Um, and I thought there was one more on the federal government stuff. Oh, I thought this might be related to that, which was, do you think communities that have historically been self-insured might move to another form of insurance? I guess that's slightly different. But there, we're running out of time, so there's three bundled together for you to go
All right.
whichever way you want. Yeah.
The FEMA, I'm going to segregate FEMA out from the rest of that federal question at the beginning. The uncertainty around FEMA clearly has paralyzed some of the discussions, but at the same time, I have seen this in Los Angeles, and I've seen this in other geographies where the need to solve this solution without FEMA there and their money, which everyone loves, but they also have antiquated rules and procedures, right? I mean, when they come into a community, it's not always a great thing because of perhaps the way some of the FEMA rules and approaches are undertaken. So, FEMA was probably in need of a deep reform. Whether it gets it and gets back into the game or not, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't spend enough time on the Hill. I just ask my friends like Dan Kanutsky, and he tells me, right? So there are people out there much smarter on those topics than I am. But I will say that the lack of, FEMA's kind of ownership of the space is is actually leading to some creativity out there. I think, I look at some of the really neat financing tools that are being developed or have been launched in LA. They would not have been, that wouldn't be happening if FEMA was just dishing out money out there, right? So I'm not saying that net, it's great that FEMA has gone through what it's gone through. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. But this lack of federal heavy-handed ownership of the space has led to some really creative approaches, and I think that's something that we should really think about and take advantage of because people are willing to do things they couldn't or wouldn't do otherwise. When it comes to the data, I'm shocked that the industry, isn't up there every day on the Hill, pounding away, and making a bigger deal out of it. Because we are a data sector, and if we're going to keep saying, and we should keep saying because it's the truth, that we need the data to understand the risk, to be able to price it, and play our role in society, it's fundamental that we have access to the NCAR data, the NOAA data, the NASA data. And that's quasi existential, the fact that we may be losing access to some of those data sources. So that's an area that I think the industry can and should be doing much more on, Caroline. And we should be creating kind of a platform where all this data can migrate to, right? And let us hire the 1,200 scientists at NCAR that are, making the atmospheric research what it is, right? Making the United States the premier provider of that information. So, that's a space that I have a very different answer for, and I think we should be much more aggressive on. In terms of the munis, similar to what I said earlier, I think without FEMA there to tell them what to do, yeah, it's scary. But again, there were disincentives being set by FEMA to buy insurance, right? With basically double counting of benefits, right? Duplication of benefit language. So, I think there will be opportunities to work with communities in a very different way, in this environment. And I think the insurance industry should be, and I know many of us are out there talking to these municipalities about, all right, now that FEMA's not going to roll up with the Federal Reserve's printing press, what are you going to do to protect yourself? Here are the tools we have. Can we help you? Can we do? So yeah, I do think there's a new era of insurance for municipalities that will emerge now. That no matter how FEMA comes back, I have to believe that they will remove those disincentives and there'll be more private sector involvement in the insurance of public properties, publicly owned properties. And then the last one about communities that they self-insure today, right now, self-insure knowing that FEMA's going to come in, they're going to have to pay, the match or whatnot. But, I think, in fact, there's some really good work being done by the GFOA, the Government Financial Officers Association, and others around just that. Meaning, are you prepared for your rainy day fund? Are you fiscally prepared for these other risks if FEMA isn't there? Because even though we'd say they were self-insuring, 20% or something like that, right? So it is, again, to repeat myself, I guess, it's a different world now with FEMA, and I think a lot more creative ideas. Now, that's happening at a time when fiscal pressures are already growing on communities. The pension issue, comes up every few years about how dramatically underfunded a lot of these towns and city, state, government pension funds are. That's a pressure. You got to keep the teachers in the classroom and the cops on the street. I mean, this is getting harder and harder and harder. In fact, I think that, you know, Carolyn, when we are doing this, 30 years from now, because I don't know, maybe we've known each other for 25 years or something like that. Whenever you were with Howard, I don't want to expose how old you are, but I'm old. Um, but 25 years from now, when we look back, assuming we've been successful in kind of playing our role and helping harden assets and at a community level and an individual level, the heroes here are going to be the city managers, right? Because they're the ones who are going to somehow find the funding, somehow get the bonds done, somehow do all these other things, and then still, get through, these various pressures and institute the changes that need to be done from a risk perspective in their communities. That's a massive task. So I do think that's the entire space about community insurance and municipalities is ripe for change. It's coming, and it's an opportunity for the industry yet again, to help these communities, help help those communities protect our balance sheets essentially by taking the right steps at a community level to reduce risk.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling out some of these like additional pressures and challenges that are in some ways making the tasks around insurance even harder. So the ones you just mentioned about local fiscal pressures, but also at the top you talked about, which I think is important to understand too, how the pressure on insurance premiums is not just the growing risk related to climate, that's part of it, but also we've had, growing construction costs and all these macroeconomic stuff that's also driving up the cost of insurance. Um, and I appreciate your call for some creative thinking because, we need to find solutions that address all of this, kind of
Yeah,
holistically.
and Carolyn, it's also one of the reasons why, I think fundamentally one of my arguments or theories or whatever you want to call it, is that the insurance industry is going into these issues too narrowly focused on risk transfer. Now, before people start screaming about, well, that's what we do. Yes, that's what we do. Yes, that's how we make money. Again, I wrote about 30 quarterly financial results. I understand that. But, when we face this with automobiles, in the 60s and 70s, when we saw an incredible spike in not only crashes, but deaths and economic loss, we didn't simply look at underwriting. We looked at safety issues, and we created an ecosystem with the federal government having a role, the private sector having a role, state government having a role, all of which were very surgically intertwined. And some of that was risk transfer. Some of it was IIHS, which right now, became the de facto automobile safety regulator on the planet. Same thing with electricity. In the 1890s when it came out, we are the ones who established Underwriters Laboratory to kind of to look at all the uses of electricity and to reduce the risk. That then allowed us to underwrite and transfer the risk, when it was being used. So I do have a bit of frustration that we seem to go into all of these issues only thinking about the risk transfer elements, which are very complex and we can't get wrong. I mean, absolutely, there's nothing that we can sacrifice about staying disciplined on pricing and writing responsibly. End of sentence, end of paragraph, end of page, end of book, whatever you want to call it. That said, there's nothing keeping us from utilizing all our capabilities in different ways. right? Yeah, we'll do the risk transfer stuff, but right now, so many entities that are trying to do the right thing, they need data, they need analytics, they need benchmarking, they need, some forecasting that's longer term that we have access to, but we don't build into our pricing, right? So I think, Carolyn, that there's so much more we could be doing if we could recognize that, yeah, risk transfer is our core, but let's open the aperture a little bit and recognize that for us to be able to price anything requires a massive, massive amount of computational capabilities, engineering skills, economic knowledge, um, oceanography, hydrology, weather, meteorology. There's so much knowledge in the insurance sector that is absolutely being demanded by stakeholders across the board today that I hope we can find a way to unlock all those capabilities and unleash them, the people who have those skills, who want to be part of the solution. Because without it, I don't know where those answers are going to come from, right? Particularly all those different skill sets with the risk lens, right? This is it, right? This is the big challenge. This is the big, this is this, I can't think of another topic where the insurance sector will be more critically needed than what we're facing today with these climate risks.
Wow, I feel like that was like where we should end. That was like the hit the home point. Yeah, that I think that was fantastic. And it goes right back to what you were saying about the need for creating these partnerships and coalitions that are bringing all these divergent expertises in.
We've done it before. We have a proud, proud legacy of doing that. And what strikes me is, you're watching television on the weekends, watching whatever sport you watch or whatever, and then these ads come on and Sunday afternoon ads, big truck ad and big macho guys, and the truck is tough, and then they say 4-star safety ratings. Well, guess what? They just cited the insurance sector to sell a truck on a Sunday afternoon, right? There's no reason why we can't get to some similar version of that with homes. I mean, people care about their families in the home as much as they do in their truck, right? So, it shows that we do have this ability to kind of transcend the transactional part of our business, and to be that kind of broader arbiter of risk and safety in the U.S. Or the global economy. And we've achieved that in the auto space. And I think if we can just reimagine how we could play that in the property space, I think the partnerships will start to come, and the answers will start to come, and we'll start to, I think, lean in on that social role that we play in terms of helping manage social risks. I'm absolutely confident of it, Carolyn. Whether it happens during my period of work doing it or yours, I'm not sure, but I know we have the skills. I've seen us do it in the past, and I'm very confident we're going to do it again in the future.
So I'm going to presume your answer to it next question then, which is, and we have about 4 or 5 more minutes here, which is another one that came in is how do companies navigate understanding if there's going to be an uninsurable future or not? And it sounds to me like you just said, you think that with the right actions now, we don't have to worry about an uninsurable future, that if we get this right, we can preserve insurability, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that how you're
Yeah,
thinking about this?
don't put the words "no worry" in my mouth for
Okay,
sure.
he's plenty worried, everyone.
Because nothing I've said is easy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to take leadership and skills and bandwidth. I mean, the most precious thing of all is time. Do people have time to work on these, yet still be incredibly busy on their day job, right? So the industry is going to have to prioritize it. The industry is going to have to probably organize itself in a way that makes our skills and capabilities easier to access to our partners and in our communities and whatnot. So, don't get me wrong. It's easy to say, it's easy to imagine, for me at least, us playing that role. But, having managed functions within a company and the budgets, pressure that's very real and competitive dynamics that are intense in this industry. I mean, it's not going to be easy, Carolyn, right? So, So at the end of the day, it's leadership. It's decisions that are made or not made by our senior most people about investing resources here or there or committing to that action or this action. And again, I just want to stress, I'm not talking about reducing risk, reducing our prices, or doing anything irresponsible. These are not incompatible. I really don't believe they're incompatible, but I think we need to do a much better job of um, of making this a group effort, a societal effort around risk identification and reduction. But again, I think we've got the history, we've done it, and if we don't do it, I don't know who does.
I love that. Okay, last question in just a couple minutes here, which is going to get a little more niche. So we're going to end on a smaller thing despite these great grand visions that you've presented to all of us, which is a couple questions came in around some of the innovative types of insurance that have been getting more airtime lately. So one is curious about your thoughts on parametric insurance and whether it has roles that might be helpful in solving any of these climate related challenges. There was also another question about embedded insurance or tying insurance to mortgages, which might come back to some of the timing questions earlier. So in the last 2 minutes, anything you want to say about some of these, what should we say, less traditional approaches, at least in the US, in the context of the US market?
Bring them on.
Great, period.
I mean, to me, they're all examples of creativity, and we're going to need a lot of it, right? So again, not irresponsible creativity. I mean that's a short game, and we can't be in this for the short term, right? So, in particular, I think the parametrics, is could be I wouldn't say transformational, but certainly revolutionary in terms of the the ability to just really surgically focus, hone in on the risk, like just so narrowly, right? That I think as those get priced better and analyzed better, and we can reduce some of the basis risk and whatnot. I think I think the parametric is going to be an incredible tool going forward. The embedded, the group structures, micro insurance, the short, buying insurance for one ski day or something, things like that, the demand, all of those I think have to come as well. When we were getting into technology and into the early days of the insurtech and fintech, the industry was saying, look, all these tools are going to be used to empower our clients. I'm not 100% certain that's what we've done with the tools. And if, but others are trying to do that, right? They're really trying to put risk management in the hands of our clients. And I think all of these do that. And I think they're going to become even more prevalent as we understand them as a sector better, as our clients understand them, and as the demand for new and different innovative approaches to what some people think is an old, stodgy, tired industry. I would argue is young,
Not
vibrant,
anymore.
creative. Not anymore. It's the place to be, and
Yeah.
I think it's now incumbent on us to take on that responsibility and do something about it, Carolyn. So that's why I really applaud you and the I4G team and everything you guys are doing and everything you've done really since I've known you from the UPenn days. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Back at you. It's been a fun couple decades, huh? And with that, we're out of time. So thank you for joining us, Francis. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. For those of you who missed it, we'll be posting this. And I also want to encourage folks to sign up for 2 upcoming webinars. We have our next Research to Practice webinar, which is where we have researchers share some of the insights of their work for practitioners. And we have Lars Powell coming. As Francis said at the top, everyone is very impressed with what Alabama's been doing. You can come hear some more from him. And then our next Ask Me Anything will be in June with Victor Joseph of Mercury. And our focus there will be on wildfire and insurance.
Catch that one. Victor is a visionary, so catch that one if you can.
Great. Thank you again, Francis. Thank you to everyone. It's been a pleasure talking with you as always. Bye, everyone.